Hi, everybody, and welcome. José Gaona, President and CEO of Zeta. We are so excited for this month's conversation. It is very timely, specifically given that it is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. There is so much to talk about, and these conversations have been really permeating everything for us. From our conversations on Capitol Hill to the conversations we've been having offline with friends. We are joined by somebody really special this month, really excited, but I'm going to go ahead and dive into it so we can get started. So as I said, it is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. There is no better time to talk about cyber. In the last few decades, our national security has become more at risk with the digitization of information, and in the last few decades, addressing the rise in cyber attacks that comes with that and infrastructure stability means having a conversation about the changes we need to implement in the long term. Here to join us in that conversation is Dr. Faisal Kaleem. Dr. Faisal Kaleem is a professor of computer science and cybersecurity at Metropolitan State University in Michigan, where he leads research and education Minnesota initiatives focused on advancing national cybersecurity with over 25 years of experience as an educator, researcher, and strategist. He's led multi-million-dollar projects funded by the NSA, NSF, and the Department of Defense, now Department of War. Dr. Kaleem is the founder and executive director of MN Cyber, positioning Minnesota as a cybersecurity innovation hub, and serves as the vice chair of the Minnesota National Security Ecosystem, ensuring public-private alignment in national security innovation. Recognized nationally for his leadership in cybersecurity education and workforce development, Dr. Kaleem continues to champion innovation, talent cultivation, and research that strengthens our nation's digital resilience. Dr. Kaleem, Faisal, it is so good to have you in this conversation, and I cannot wait to dive into this because it is so timely. I apologize about the Michigan thing. I was in Minnesota and Michigan back to back, and so both of them are very fresh in my brain, great states from the Midwest. But how are you doing today?
I am doing great. But first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction. But before we formally, dive into the conversation, I gotta say something. So I was actually checking out your website, the Zeta's website, before coming on, and I think it's safe to say that I might be the oldest generation ever invited to this podcast. So, and I think that makes me the official Gen X representative at the Gen Z table, which is both terrifying and awesome. But here's the thing, even though, I might be a few software versions behind you all, I have spent my career working with your generation, teaching, mentoring, and learning from digital natives who see the world through a totally different lens. And honestly, that's what excites me the most because you guys, Gen Z, you were born digital. You never known a world without Wi-Fi, smartphones, or cloud storage. You are fluent in both human and machine languages. You code, create, and connect faster than any generation, before you. You are not just using technology, you are shaping it. So that's the reason, kind of like I'm very, very excited. But I said, hey, I want to get rid of this thing from my chest that, hey, I'm the oldest one over here, but I understand how you guys roll.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
I mean,
Right.
number one, like that is
Definitely.
so exciting for us because you have so much background in the work that we're going to talk about today. And number two, because the impact that you're having today is benefiting our generation. And when I was at Metropolitan
Thank you.
State and I was connecting with some of the folks at the university, I really was taken aback by the leadership that you all have demonstrated in addressing one of those topics that every time that I am on Capitol Hill talking about cyber comes up, which is workforce development. It is a huge, huge conversation. And let's contextualize it, right? I think we've already done that a little bit, but over the last 20 years, over the last 10 years, as we've seen different waves of development to the digital world, from social media to the expansion of broader connectivity and wireless technologies, we have also exacerbated risk. So much of our sensitive information, so much of our medical records or financial information, civic information that we share with the government is digitized. And so the risks that we're facing are monumental. We hear and have heard over the last few years that we've had some pretty large hackings. We've had some large security risks. I think people are no strangers to spam or robocalls or attempts for people to try to steal your data. And so it is very timely. The US is facing a worker shortage when it comes to having enough professionals that are addressing our cybersecurity needs, both as a country at a state level, when we talk about that national security, but also our small businesses. Our mid to large size businesses, our persons, our individuals. And so this conversation really is timely because we're working on this right now. You're working on this right now, preparing the next generation, our generation, and we're working on this right now, talking about the policies needed to make sure we have the right infrastructure and continue to invest in folks with the vision, such as yourselves. So really, really excited for the conversation. We want to kind of go into the conversation by talking about first how we moved from physical to digital security. Again, over the last couple of years, we've gone from worrying about physical security infrastructure to now that national and personal data infrastructure. How, how have we managed, in your opinion, in light of such a quick shift, right, massive shift over the last few years, to adapt? How have we managed or not managed to adapt?
Yeah, that's such a good place to start, Jose. I mean, if you think back a few decades, even before social media, before smartphone, security simply means or meant gates, guards, dogs, cameras. Okay. And if you think about it, the biggest risk those days was, hey, somebody's going to break into my house, not the data breach. Okay. Fast forward to today. Now we are your phone. Your phone holds everything. Your phones hold your banking, your photos, your medical records, your entire digital identity, is in your phone. So the best way I could say this thing is the vault now moved online into your phone. What's wild is how fast that shift actually have occurred. We digitized faster than what we secured, and that's the problem. Cloud computing, online banking, streaming, all of it exploded within one generation. And while the world was chasing speed and convenience, security had sprint to catch up. So how did we adapt them? And that's basically your question. I would say in three overlapping way. And Gen Z, this is where your story really starts. So we redefine what security ever means. We are talking about, once again, in the old days, we protected places. Now we are protecting data. It doesn't matter where you are. It matters what you connect to. Okay. We built digital guardrails, encryption, multi-factor authentication. You probably have been hearing about the zero trust architecture. They became our new locks. Okay, think of it as a shift from castle wall to smart cities. We stopped relying on one big wall and started layering the defenses. So firewall, endpoint protection, behavioral analytics, about the insider threats and so on, and constantly verifying trust. And that's basically the essence of the zero trust. And lastly, the third one is we realized human are the center, not the technology. Technology did not eliminate the human error. So that's the problem. It actually magnified it. That's why most companies now spend as much as on training people as they do, on buying the technology and the software. So, and the other thing I want to mention over here is that when it comes to the government made some leaps as well. So back in 2024, the US launched a massive what we call a zero trust rollout. across all the federal agencies, meaning even inside secure networks, every device, every user must be continuously authenticated or authorized. They must continuously need to prove who they are. Okay. And then problem is everyone learned the same painful lessons, which is basically convenience without security equal chaos. That's basically, people, I always tell my students, there is a simple formula. Convenience is inversely proportional to security. If you try to improve the convenience, you got to get rid of the security. If you try to improve the security, you got to get rid of the convenience. We have to balance the equation.
Mm. I love what you say and flag about balance, because I think specifically for younger folks that have been navigating some of these platforms or spaces their entire lives, I think there's an awareness that there's that balance.
Mhm.
And I'm always kind of surprised, specifically as you go younger and younger, how hyper aware folks are of the sensitivity of data, and how many burner accounts or private accounts they
Yep.
have to kind of navigate their digital footprint. And I find that really fascinating. Uh, of course, from a consumer end, we always want the most convenient thing possible.
Exactly.
And so we're always wondering, how do we bring a sense of convenience to the need to be a lot more proactive in our security, our digital security? Um, I think that's really interesting, and it certainly starts to help us paint a picture. I want to talk about how we expose vulnerabilities in the infrastructure that we have today. When I think about the vulnerabilities that we still have that we're facing, the things that come to mind for me are, quantum research and development, the quantum technologies of tomorrow that
Okay.
might be posing a risk to the encryptions of today. We have folks that are out there, looking at kind of what's it called? Uh, uh, Take now, decrypt later. I think I'm misphrasing that, but um, these folks, these bad actors out there that are taking encrypted information now
Mhm.
with the anticipation that
Mhm.
as those quantum technologies become operational, they will have the ability to decrypt anything that they have now,
Exactly.
even if they can't today. And
Mhm.
so we talk about, the future consequences of our data as well, encrypted information, private messages, etc. Um, how does our cybersecurity infrastructure today uh, look at those vulnerabilities and prepare for that range of potential cyber attacks?
Yeah, again, great question. If you imagine the internet as a living city, cybersecurity, you can think of its infrastructure, the power grids, the roads, the public safety system. They're all part of the infrastructure. And right now, here's what I'm going to say. That city is both amazing and at the same time bit messy as well. Some neighborhoods are ultra modern, global cloud providers, defense agencies and big banks. They got all this AI monitoring going on. AI is basically monitoring the traffic, encryption everywhere, 24/7 threat hunting teams. They are looking for all those different threats and so on. But then at the same time, you also have that those old neighborhoods, legacy codes, outdated system, small budgets, one IT person, the poor person who's doing jobs for 10 people, okay? That's your local school district. That's your small nonprofit. That's your hometown government. And here's the problem. Hackers or the bad guys, they don't care where you live. They only go for the weakest door in the neighborhood because every networks connect to one another. They know this thing that they once they get into a particular neighborhood, they will be able to get to the other neighborhoods as well. So today's infrastructure, to answer your question, completely uneven. At the top, you have the defense, you have the healthcare providers, they pour billions and billions of dollars into cyber resilience. But again, the fact of the matter is that DoD alone, you know, uh, the top people, they cannot do everything, by themselves. The DoD runs multiple classified cyber operations centers around the clock. Big tech companies, does the same thing. But below that, those small, medium-sized businesses that you were talking about, many local government, many underserved communities cannot afford that enterprise-grade defense. That's why ransomware group, always target them because fast cash, low risk, and so on. But the good news is that the collaboration is improving now. So, for example, as I said, I always rely on the good stuff that is happening. So, CISA, which is a cybersecurity infrastructure security agency, they actually developed something called a Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or JCDC. Um, and then again, we at the state level have a bunch of initiatives that kind of like connect the public and private sectors so threat intelligence travel at the internet speed, not at the bureaucracy speed. So, and then at the same time, when we say that, hey, AI tools are helping the bad guys, AI tools are also helping the good guys as well, because the small organization can now deploy anomaly detection that used to cost millions and millions of dollars. Machine learning, has become the equalizer as well. But remember, infrastructure isn't the only code over here. It's the culture, the organization that makes every one part of the defense team. That's basically is always going to win. The weakest one's always going to say, that's IT's job. Why do I care about it? And Gen Z, this is where you shine because you already crowdsource everything. When I say crowdsourcing, threat intelligence, crowdsourcing is going to be awesome thing to do. So you crowdsource memes, you crowdsource solution, you crowdsource startups. Apply that same mindset to the cybersecurity. Collaboration will beat the isolation.
I find that really interesting as a kind of a model that Gen Z is following. I do see it in practice. I see it within our team. We have so many young folks, Gen Z, in our team, and I see the way that they're very quick to connect. And I get messages sometimes. It's funny how I think from a micro standpoint, folks always kind of look at me as the CEO, and so the targets usually tend to carry my name. Um, the kind of targeted messages that attempt to kind of break through, and so they usually say, you know, I need your personal email and phone number to respond to this immediately.
Yep.
Your boss, Mr. Jose, it's blah 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 blah. And I find that so funny. One, because that's not my voice. I would never message somebody like that. But two, because we're all also texting each other constantly for work. And so anytime that kind of a message comes through, to your point, it's that immediate community messaging of like, hey, this wasn't you, right? No, that wasn't me. And that becomes very easy to work with when you're that connected and you're plugging into that broader community. We have, I think, that as like a really good example of the cybersecurity conversation that applies to most individuals. I think about folks like my mom, who, she uses her smartphone and is constantly kind of getting those messages as well. She's created kind of an understanding of, how to keep herself safe from any of those threats. And whenever she has a doubt, she'll reach out to me and kind of, ask me to help her walk through that. We have those resources at a personal level that sometimes help us navigate, which is really wonderful. When we talk about the big picture, when we talk about either, these larger corporations, our national government, the country, and the systems that we operate with at a mass scale, the threat that we face is much greater. Sometimes they're state threats, sometimes they're individual actors, but they're posing a bigger threat because I think the intentions are often a lot more malicious, or they're after a lot more harm intentionally. Can you paint a picture of today when we talk about cybersecurity? What is the composition of cybersecurity infrastructure? Is the majority of the concern and effort focused on those state players and those state attacks? Or are they focused on the individual? Because I do know that when we talk about the individual, we're talking billions of dollars that are lost every year. So, which, in the landscape of things, are you able to describe kind of how they weigh each other?
So you're talking about the different threat actors, like the attackers, from the individual, from the small scale perspective to a larger scale. If I'm kind of understanding your question correctly.
Yeah, which
Okay,
one makes up more of
sure.
the
Yeah,
focus for folks like you
yeah.
in your work to build the next
Or
workforce?
actually, I would say, Jose, that when it comes to the scale, every scale there is going to be some sort of cybersecurity, some sort of threat actor that will be able to come and do some sort of damage. So again, from the smaller scale perspective, again, you just painted the picture already, that talking about your mom, as an individual, but just for the Gen Z who are listening, a simple example, which I know that most of them may have experienced this thing in the past, is that they are on campus, they get an email that looks like it is from university, okay, and it says tuition payment failed. Click here. You click login, boom, your credentials gone. That's phishing. Millions happen daily. Okay. Medium scale, your favorite coffee shop runs the old software on its checkout tablets, or the software is not up to date or updated. Hackers slip in the malicious code and start skimming the cards, the credit cards. The shop loses the revenue and the trust, chaos for a week. Large scale, which actually is very recent in my memory, the city of St. Paul got ransomware attacked. Okay. So I would say the largest scale would be a ransomware gag infiltrates a hospital system or city system, encrypts every patient records or city records, and then demands ransomware in bitcoins. Uh, Again, from the hospital perspective, doctor can't access them, lives hang in limbo. It's not fiction. It's actually is happening, on a daily basis as we speak. And I just gave you the fresh example of city of St. Paul ransomware attack. I mean, it's mind boggling that if a resourceful city like St. Paul can get a ransomware attack, imagine the cities and the counties which are not that kind of resourceful. What's going to happen? They're not going to be able to quickly stand up and be on their foot, as quickly as the city did. And then there is a national scale, which is where the big actors comes in. We are talking about the smart grids attack, shutting off power. So again, if I remember correctly, in 2024 there was a energy provider in Asia. They faced hours long blackout, not from storms, not from malware. I mean, but from the malware buried deep in the control software. And then I want to quickly add the AI to the mix, because now the line between the fiction and the reality blurs. You were giving me an example about you constantly text or receive a text message and so on. But now imagine deep fake voices or deep fake videos, which are they deep fake voices can say, "Hey, I approve the wire transfer," or synthetic emails mimic CEOs. Attacks adopt, you know, mid-flight, and so on. So I mean, again, but the good news is that defenders are also innovating. Okay, uh, they are also applying the AI. So AI threat hunters now can predict suspicious behavior before it can actually happen, like smart smoke detectors.
Right.
Sensing the heat before the flame.
Yeah. I think that is something that's really comforting to hear, that at the same speed that we're seeing these actors who are trying to pull information, innovate, we're seeing a response in innovation. Um, I think the question that comes up for me is, at this massive scale, when we see these larger attacks, who are the most common perpetrators? Do we have a sense of profile of whether they're state actors, individual private actors? What's the profiling there?
Yeah, that's the million click question. I'm going to use your language. uh, Again, picture the internet as a crowded night market. Every stall look legitimate, but behind some curtains are spies, thieves, and pranksters. That's cybersecurity today. A mix of state-sponsored team, organized criminal groups, and independent hacktivists. That actually kind of comprises the whole cybersecurity trajectory. But let's start with the state-sponsored actor because they are the top one. These are the one which basically are nation backed cyber units. And again, I'm going to mention Russia's Sandworm, and these are just example, and these are all public information. Russia's Sandworm, China's APT-41, North Korea's Lazarus Group, Iran's Charming Kitten. You're gonna have fun with these names, right? Uh, but they are not random teenagers in the basement eating pizza and doing some sort of coding and attacking. They are trained teams with heavy budgets, mission, and targets. Their motive varies. Obviously, it could be a espionage, it could be a sabotage, it could be an influence. So, for example, Russia mainly focuses on disruption. They go after energy grids, they go after elections, they go after disinformation, and so on. China goes for intellectual property and long-term tech dominance. I mean, think semiconductor blueprints or biomedical data. You have been hearing so many different things, from them. When it comes to North Korea, they hack crypto exchanges, to fund its regime. There are again so many different type of news articles that people can read, and then again from that you can then think of the criminal networks. They just run like startups. Some even have their own HR departments and customer services chat lines up. Groups like Logbit or Black Cat, they operate something called a ransomware as a service or RAS. They sometimes can lease out attack kits to affiliate who is split the profit with them. So again, if a particular hospital or school gets hit with the ransomware, odds are that there is a whole business chain behind it. There are developers, there are access broker, negotiators, money launderers. I mean, there's a whole team that is basically doing it. And then finally, the last group I'm going to mention over here to your question are the independent actors or the hacktivists. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, I'm pretty sure Gen Z and some of them love them as well. They might, heard about anonymous group or cyber, partisans or Google Maya. Their motives, ideology, curiosity, or simply causing, chaos. They deface the websites, they leak the data, they expose the corruption. So in a way, they are doing something good as well. But again, I cannot endorse the entire operation, the way that they perform the whole thing. Sometimes they really genuinely push for justice. Sometimes they just want attention. So these are the three main groups that I would say. But let me mention one quick thing. These are the three groups, but the scary part is their their world overlap. A hacktivist group might secretly receive tools from a government. A criminal gang might sell stolen data to an intelligence service. The lines blur.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I think we talk about how complex the ecosystem that we're operating in really is today, because these actors, we're not talking about a black and white distinction of good, bad, completely separate entities. Sometimes we're operating within an intricate network where also at an international level we're operating with uncertainty in the intentions of all of the players that are playing within a digital ecosystem. We hear that come up quite a lot as we talk about AI, and AI deployment at a global level, and the U.S.'s competitiveness there with other state players like China. Um, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind recently, because we've been, even though we're currently still under the government shutdown, Um, I think things are a little bit unprecedented at the moment. I want to talk about uh, the policies because at a federal level, I have been pleasantly surprised to see rapid passage of some of our cybersecurity bills, priorities that I think both sides of the aisle recognize are really imperative to the safety of the infrastructure that we are building and maintaining digitally. But there's always more to do, and I think uh, where that sense of urgency slows a bit is around workforce development, where we take that threat, that immediate threat, and start to talk about a long-term threat or long-term dilemma, which is us having the workforce we need to continue to build and maintain this safety infrastructure. On the Hill, folks ask themselves this question often. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the state's responsibilities? Is it the federal government's responsibility? Private actor responsibility to build this workforce? And while everybody is asking themselves this question, the demand and the concern in the short term to midterm continues to just grow. So I had that in mind when I was in Minnesota and started hearing about this amazing Dr. Kaleem who was leading the work out of Metropolitan State
Shit.
University
Yep.
to train the next generation
Well,
of cybersecurity professionals. And so that was a huge aha moment. And I really do give you kudos. I think they're incredibly well deserved because what you have done in that environment to help cultivate the next generation of leaders in the industry is directly solving that dilemma. And I think
and
there's so much to learn from that and a very strong argument for the value of continued federal and state investment in these programs. And so I want to acknowledge that here in the conversation through my sniffling, as I'm kind of battling a
thank you.
cold, but because it's really valuable. When I go on the Hill, I was on Capitol Hill yesterday talking about these dilemmas we're facing, and when they ask like, what do we do about this or how do we address this, I say, well, you should go learn about what they're doing at Metro State University because that's amazing, and we need more of that all over the country,
Sure.
right? And so I think that's incredible. We have, organizations and governments that are ramping up their security infrastructure,
Mhm.
and that private public partnership becomes more and more important. The public private partnership that leads to programs like the ones that we see coming out of universities, but also, the partnerships that allow us to exchange information about these threats that we see on a daily basis.
Fantastic.
What, in your opinion, especially given what you've been able to build at Metro State University, what else is needed out of that public-private partnership to move us forward?
Oh, this one hits home. And obviously, the quick answer to that question is unlimited funding, which
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. But thank you very much for your comments about Metro State. We really worked hard to make sure that the next generation of the cybersecurity workforce basically get trained, and they have all the resources available on their hand, and so on. So I mean, again, we created multiple programs. Like one of our signature program is called the Cyber for Heroes program. Now that is basically part of the national program by the name Cyber Skills for Jobs program as well. That program is all about bringing in veterans, transitioning military officers, first responders, um, and other select individuals. And what we do, we recruit them, we train them, um, and then we kind of help them get into the workforce. And it's completely free for the veterans because it's all funded. Uh, there was another beautiful program that NSA funded us initially for the 2 years, and the funding got cut. But we decided to, still continue to run the program. Is Cybersecurity Clinic, and the Cybersecurity Clinic is one of the beautiful programs where we actually recruit the students, train them, and then these students actually go out in the field and provide free risk assessment services to all these underserved clients like K-12 schools, small cities and counties, nonprofits, places of worships, and so on. And the whole idea is to make sure that, not only raise the community awareness, but at the same time, help those underserved community which does not have those enough resources. So now we are also getting into some sort of policy development, because we found out that most of these small businesses and nonprofit organizations, they don't even know the word policy, what policy means when it comes to cybersecurity. So now we are also helping them under the clinic how to actually implement some sort of policies and come up with procedures from those policies and so on. So, in my opinion, Jose, we need to have some of these programs funded and very, very well funded. I understand that, the priorities might be different, but as I always tell my legislature, whenever I talk to my, congressional delegation, state legislatures, and so on, the issue again is the same, that we are still living in a very, very reactive mode. We only do things when something happens. We are still not thinking about security on a proactive basis, which is where the funding comes in, which is where funding in these kind of programs, comes in as well. So again, to your question, funding is one of the major issue. The federal government and the state government, they need to fund these kind of programs or implement these kind of programs. The good news is that, for example, as part of the National Center for Academic Excellence, schools, which is now under the DoD, they basically receives some sort of grants money and so on to implement some of these kind of programs. But again, it's not enough. Not every school can get that kind of grant money and so on. So I would say that's basically, one of the major thing that needs to happen from the policy perspective, that they need to come up with some sort of funding mechanism to help the universities. And by the way, why universities? Because once again, Gen Z, you are curious. You actually think outside the box. And then, when we put you to a task, you come up with some sort of amazing solutions. Okay. And that is the reason I always tell my friends on the Hill that, hey, keep on funding these programs.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because it's an ecosystem of policy conversations as well that are
Correct.
all happening simultaneously.
Mhm.
And we talk about, what's happening with the development of AI, these massive data centers that we have going up all over the country that are adding need, right?
Yep.
Because with that comes more need for professionals that are upholding that security infrastructure digitally. That, of course, then has an implication on the workforce need for energy production and the workforce need around all of the user interfaces for all of that work. In that ecosystem of policy, because policy doesn't happen in a vacuum, we also have a very different landscape today around our ability to rely on foreign talent versus domestic talent.
Mhm.
That's a whole separate conversation. But the reality that we are facing today now, in light of newer executive orders out of the White House, is that we do need to look at how are we fostering domestic talent with some of the restrictions or limitations or deterrents that we've put on some of these visa programs where we used to rely on pulling in foreign talent. I think, a lot of the future of that and the visa landscapes that we continue to see will continue to shift around and reform over years to come. But there's
Mhm.
an irregularity to it, which causes us to look domestically to address the problem in the short term at the very least. And so, to your point, we have a stronger argument
Yeah,
today more than ever to fund these domestic
exactly.
programs because we need this workforce.
Yep.
It's not a question of do we need it. It's a question of, where are we going to get it from, and are we investing in the cultivation of it here domestically? And so, it is certainly something that we continue to share as we go to Capitol Hill, um, to talk about, the need here, because it also is a Gen Z conversation. To your point, also in that for the next decade, the generation that's entering the workforce and facing real concerns about, automation, AI automation, standard of living, cost of living, well-paying, stable jobs is Gen Z. And so when you have a space that we know is so ripe for selection, that is going to be needed for decades to come, you would want to see investment in that to drive, our young people to that
That's
space, and so it answers a lot of the problems that we're facing, at the current moment. And we see that as a tech policy focused org that kind of sees all the different working parts
exactly.
coming together. But it's really nice to hear it from your perspective as well, working with young people day in and day out. I want to move from there into learning a little bit about, the way that we are, kind of preparing and building the infrastructure itself. So we talk about how organizations and governments are building, more resilient, cybersecurity infrastructure. In your opinion, what is the most important components of building cybersecurity for organizations? What does that infrastructure look like? I'm curious about this as a leader of a business myself, right? When we talk about the cybersecurity for Zeta, what are the most important components that an organization should be looking at?
Yeah, and that's a big one, right? Because it's not just about fixing today's leaks. It's about building tomorrow's ocean. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So picture the year 2030.
Uh-huh.
You wake up in a world where security is not an add-on. It's woven into everything like oxygen. Okay.
Mm.
You don't have to think security is just there, quietly doing its job in the background. Okay. At the center, that model is something called nowadays zero trust architecture, ZTA. I know it sounds like a buzzword, but it's really a mindset. Okay. It means that nobody, and I mean nobody, and nothing gets, automatic access, not even devices already inside the network, not even users inside the network. So instead of trusting everything behind one wall, imagine your system as a neighborhood with hundreds of smart doors. Okay. Each door checks when you are, where you're coming from, and what you're allowed to touch. Okay. If anything looks off, it locks automatically. That's zero trust in a nutshell. Verify everything, everywhere, always. Don't trust, anybody. So the good news is that the government and the big companies, they're already shifting this way. For example, the US OMB, they requires federal agencies to hit the zero trust milestone by 2027. DoD and then the CISA or DOW and CISA both published, what we call full maturity models guiding that transition. In the private sector, Google has something called Beyond Corp. Microsoft has something called Entra ID. They are living examples of that never trust, always verified mentality. But the ideal model isn't just tech. Okay, it's the adaptive intelligence. Once again, the crowdsourced intelligence that we talk about in the beginning. So because attackers nowadays, and again in the future as well, they will be using AI to mutate the malware, and craft deep fakes faster than any human can fact check. So this is the job of the defender, to also adopt the AI tools to start spotting anomalies, correlating clues, and responding in seconds instead of the hours. Because obviously the fact is, right now the analysts have to sit down looking for clues and trying to find out, what happened, where the attack is coming from. So they really need to adopt this AI mindset as well. Like, hey, I really need to use the AI tools to help me get those clues. So imagine a digital immune system that recognizes when something is off and heal itself automatically. Okay, and that's the future. I think of, like, in 2030, that this should happen. And even better, again, as I said, AI will make the security very, very personalized. So, for example, from an individual perspective, instead of using the rigid password, system will learn how you move, how you type, how you talk, how you walk, your digital DNA. Your future phone, imagine this thing, your future phone might know it's you, not by your face, because right now that you can unlock your phone by your face and by your eyes and all those kind of things. But imagine your future phone is unlocking you by the rhythm of your scrolling, or what kind of video you're watching on the TikTok, okay, and so on. So underneath, it's going to be what we call resilience engineering. That's the idea, that the failure is in the end. It's the feedback. Every incident teaches, or will teach, the network to bounce back stronger. Resilience is the keyword. For Gen Z, that's good news. You know why? Because you are already living with updates, patches, and version 2.0s. Okay. Uh, Resilience should not be a new concept for you guys. It should be a lifestyle. Okay. Because you adapt fast. You remix solutions. Okay. And turn errors into iterations. So the ideal future, it's not gonna be a fortress. It's a living ecosystem, self-healing, intelligent, and human-centered. Because when security becomes invisible, people stay creative and connected without fear.
I want to draw an analogy there because we talk about this and we've mentioned kind of the organism or kind of a broader society analogy here when we talk about security in the digital world.
You're
But it really is very organism like. I really appreciate the analogy about leveraging AI and thinking about how we also have benefit from applying some of these new automations and tools, and thinking about it as an immune system. Also, a very timely analogy considering that I've been sniffling the entire time. Um, but it's really fascinating to think about it that way because it is in that same vein. It is that kind of proceed with caution at all times approach, right? Our body as an organism has very immediate responses to what is perceived as anything foreign, right?
Mhm.
And so I think there's a lot to learn from organic science in the way that we're thinking about the evolution of these digital environments and ecosystems as well, which is really always so fascinating to think about how the digital world continues to emulate the natural world. Um, it is, I think also what we're talking about in this conversation is the need for, and you've flagged this a few times, a cultural shift. A cultural
Mhm.
shift that maybe, Gen Z is a little bit more proactive and already starting to adopt, but really a cultural shift for years to come where folks really understand that we have to be um, responsible, cautious actors as we continue to build our digital footprints because of the threats that are continuing to evolve. Um, I do think that Gen Z, given the age distribution they had as the pandemic came and kind of
Right.
went, um, are very capable of adapting and kind of being first there to think through how to make those adaptations. But really, it's not just on Gen Z either. It's incumbent on all of us across all of our generations to start thinking about that cultural shift and our role in that cultural shift. We work very closely with other organizations that work with other age distributions or demographic focuses. And we have this conversation often, right? What is there to learn across generations? Because I often like to paint the picture of the physical mechanisms of security and verification that we had with some of the institutions that Gen Z doesn't quite remember the way other generations do. And what comes to mind is that
The
process of like going physically into a bank and like pulling out your old bank card and like everything's, in on paper, and like having to verify your information, go and like take out money. Now, like we take for granted, even in the last generation, this idea that we've always had debit cards and we've always had, yeah, a digitized way of interacting with our finances. But we have lessons to learn from these institutions. And so I think that mutual exchange and intergenerational collaboration to address the issues we're going to be facing for years to come is supremely important. So, really excited to continue to see that collaboration as well. Uh, I want to start closing us out here, and talking about that future. Uh, what does an ideal and resilient model for tomorrow look like as we move further into this digitized world? Is it, a strong workforce that act as like our society's immune system first responders? Is it just a more broadly educated populace? What's the vision that you have?
I mean, if I had to boil down to three priorities, they would be design, people, and partnership. Okay. When it comes to design, again, I think I mentioned it that the old mindset was, okay, now we have a system. Let's try to bolt in the security externally. So security has to be baked in instead of bolted in. Okay. Security cannot be duct taped on later. Okay. It has to live in the design phase the same way seat belts are part of the car, not an afterthought. Okay. So whether you're coding an app or designing a game or deploying an AI model, ask this question. And this is a very important question for you guys, Gen Z who are listening. How could this be abused? If you ask this one single question, you could solve so many problems. This single question will change everything. Okay, so that's basically something that, as I say, that even for the Gen Z founders and coders, that's going to be your superpower. Okay, you can start secure, uh, not retrofit secure. Okay, that's the important thing to learn over here, because when your generation is going to build with privacy, transparency, and ethics from day one, and you will redefine the norm. Okay. Second thing, people. Invest in the human factor. So I know that we have been investing in the technology and so on, but tech won't save us. People will. Every breach ultimately comes down to behavior. You know, this thing, regardless of how millions and millions of dollars of technology and AI and stuff and so on, it will still boil down to someone clicking a link, skipping a patch, or ignoring a warning, and boom, game over. That's why awareness, training, and mental health are just as vital as firewalls. Okay. Cyber pros operates under non-stop stress. That's another thing. I mean, I can tell you this thing that when the St. Paul ransomware attack happens, my God, non-stop. Okay, they were under such a you know uh, long days of stress. Uh, so again, a typical life of cyber pros: alerts, incidents, global pressure. So what we need to do, we need to support the human side as well, because if we don't do that, even the best system, fails. We also need diversity. That's very important. I know right now this word is not a favorite word at the moment, but as of 2025, only 1 in 4 cyber professionals worldwide is a woman, and representation from the communities of colors or Latinos and Black and indigenous communities remains far too low. That's not just a social gap, it's a strategic one. You know why? Because when it comes to cybersecurity, different perspectives sees different threats. Okay. Gen Z can fix that by demanding inclusive teams and mentoring each other. Okay. And the last one, as I mentioned, partnership. The government should be connecting with industry, academia. Academia should be reaching out to industry. And then we do that as well. But the biggest lesson from the last decade is no sector can do this alone. Okay. And everybody has to come together, to find or see the different type of threat patterns. They need the universities needs to build the talent, the companies needs to own the right infrastructure, and when they start sharing all this intel in real time, everybody is going to win. So the takeaway once again is going to be our strength is shared resilience. Attackers collaborate on the dark web. We must collaborate on the open web. Okay. And that's where, again, you guys come in, make TikTok videos, spread awareness, and so on.
It really is interesting to think about it, particularly I think as a model to take from things like our fire department infrastructure as a country, right? Where we have both a sense of responsibility by citizens and members of society to hold themselves to a standard to prevent fires, but also a series of policies that go from a micro to a macro level that help us mitigate those risks. But it is cultural, right? I'm thinking of so many different examples to that vein. The commercials about only you can prevent a forest fire, right?
Yep.
When you're out camping and it takes a sense of responsibility and collaborative nature. And so I think, that is an interesting mindset shift that we all should be much more consciously aware of as digital citizens, because we all are operating as
Absolutely.
digital citizens today. We have a question in the chat that I want to address that I think also speaks to this. How can we as individuals be more secure online? There was a discovery of those SIM farms in New York that were potentially damaging the people in the city. How would that have impacted us? And so I think the core of the question is, how can we as individuals be more secure? I would speak to that by saying, it's a part of that cultural shift that you're speaking to. We all have to operate with that same air of caution, um, and healthy speculation, I think is the word that I would use. But I'm happy to let you add to that as well.
Yeah. And again, the key word over here for the individual, basic cyber hygiene. I
Right.
mean, we still know so many folks who still are not using strong passwords. They still don't know what is a multi-factor authentication is. So the 3 practices that actually can provide strongest defense against the most common attacks, as I said, think about multi-factor authentication. Okay. Use a password manager if you cannot, remember all those difficult password. But again, don't use password like I love you or 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Trust me, those are still the most commonly used password. Okay.
Wow.
It is. They are still, or simply a QWERTY, QWERTY on your keyboard. And then stop revealing your own information on Instagram, or So sometimes we inadvertently do those kind of things. So for example, hey, look at my dog, and name, whatever the name is, and you know that sometimes the name of the dog or that is one of your password reset questions. So sometimes we inadvertently provide those information ourselves, So don't reveal those kind of information as well. Also, uh, think about the updates. As soon as any updates are available, you need to make sure that you just apply those updates. Don't just sit on those thinking, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it day after tomorrow, or so on. And then obviously the number one thing is the awareness, and then the threat vigilance, and so on. Spot phishing and scan. If you are not sure, or if you are not expecting that you know you receive this email and you're not expecting that email from your friend or whatever, always double check, always, and use a different channel to double check. So, for example, if you receive an email and you are not sure, pick up the phone and call that person. Hey, did you send me this email or not? So just invest in the basic cyber hygiene, and I think you're gonna be okay.
I love the phrasing of that as well, cyber hygiene. I think that's really, really good way to put it, because it also kind of paints that picture that we are digital citizens operating in this new reality that's an extension of our own to a large degree. But um, Faisal, Dr. Kaleem, it has been so incredible to speak with you today. I think this is again such a timely conversation. I so look forward for us to be able to continue to hear from the updates that you all continue to champion at Metropolitan State University, the work that you continue to do. We are trying to educate our folks on the value of making these investments to continue to build this movement and cultural shift needed for the cybersecurity future, and the threats that we face today. And so thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for everybody that's watching this, the folks that will continue to watch this as we make it accessible online. We are very thankful and happy to let you close this out here, but just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, so Jose, I want to thank everyone at Zeta for hosting this conversation, and all of you for listening. The builders, the thinkers, the dreamers, and the defenders. You are the first generation to grow up completely digital, okay? That means you are also the first generation with the power to define what security really means. The future won't be written by those who just consume technology. It will be written by those who question it, improve it, and humanize it. That's you guys. So as I close, remember one thing. Cybersecurity is no longer a career, it's a culture, okay? It's a shared rhythm that keeps our digital world in harmony. Every secure password, every ethical choice, every line of code is a note in that song. Gen Z, you are not just participants in this story, you are the author of this story. Write boldly, code ethically, lead fearlessly. And never forget, the future is password protected, but you hold the key. Thank you very much.
So well said. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to having you at our next Tech Talk. Thank you.
Thank you.